This is the continuation for Getting Started and Basic Manipulation for the Introduction to GIS course. So if you're following directly from the previous lecture, I've added a couple of additional pieces of data. I added lakes from the United States and a border for the United States. We had Canada, Mexico, latitude and longitude, and cities. And I just, again, added data and picked up a couple of other ones for the next part of this lecture. So we've learned about the table of contents and the view and the properties and how to get in them and those sorts of things. Now we're going to begin to understand some of the tools that we might need. A lot of the most used tools are prompted and provided by default, but we will regularly need additional tools that we will need to actually acquire. We can either add an entire toolbar that has a set of tools associated with it or just individual tools. In order to reach the toolbars, we pull down the Customize drop-down. You don't click, you can just hover over the toolbars and then it is revealed all of the toolbars that we have access to. A few that we will need regularly will be the Editor toolbar, which is found here. The georeferencing, we will eventually get to that one a little bit later on. We can use the labeling one, although we'll find an additional way to do that. We can also customize, be very specific, and customize the tools that we want. So if I select the Customize option, which is very last, and then the Commands tab, which is right here in the center, I get a set of tools, actually full toolbars, that are listed on the left-hand side. Once it has loaded, which takes a second because there are quite a few of them, you can make a selection as to which toolbar you're interested in pulling an individual tool from. For example, we will use some from the Selection toolbar. It's very easy to acquire it. You just click whichever tool you're interested in on the right and drag it to your toolbar. You can see the dark line will show you where it plans to place this tool, and then when you release, it will apply there. If you decide you don't want it, no reason to take them off, but here I accidentally duplicated it, you can just click it and drag it back and it will remove itself. So those are fairly simple ideas. When we look at any of the tools that are default, by hovering over the tool, it will reveal a little bit of information about what it is if you're not quite sure how they work. Some of the tools have automatic process. So for example, this particular zoom tool, if I click it, it automatically changes the view, changes the map. It zooms in automatically. Other tools that we will use change the function of your cursor. So for example, if I select the Pan tool, nothing happens to the map right away, but my cursor can now do different things. So if I move the tool into the map and click and hold, I can move my map more specifically. To zoom, I can change the function of my cursor to the Zoom tool, and instead of having it move directly into the center of the map, I can be very specific about where I move the map to. If I goof up, I can use the go back. It's like a step backwards. You can also step forwards again if you wish to do that. So generally, being specific about your zooming is the most useful. Another useful tool that we will use regularly is the Identify tool. So maybe you are trying to determine the difference between two cities or identify what a river is called or something like that. You can change the function of your cursor to the Identify tool, move it into the map, and then you just click on whatever it is that you need to have information about, and it will provide it in an Identify box. A useful portion of this box is this first pull down here. If you select a particular feature class, remember those are the individual pieces of data within your table of contents, then you can be specific about what is provided. So if I change it to U.S. cities and then click specifically on a city, then I get information that the database has on that particular city. You can also select all of the layers, for example, And then if I click on a city, I will get not only the city information, but also the state information and any other information that it has associated with this geography, with this particular place in the world. So identify is quite useful. When you're finished using a tool, you will want to change the function of your cursor back to what I might refer to as the pointer, but this shows that it's called select elements, but it's just the basic standard format of your cursor. Another useful tool will be the find tool. Looks like a little pair of binoculars. So if you're interested in finding a particular city, maybe you're familiar with the area that I ask you about, but maybe you're not. So if you need to find it, you just select that tool and then put in what you're interested in looking for. So for example, I might identify that I'm trying to find Portland, Oregon. Now, a thing that could be helpful is to identify which feature class you want the computer to look in. So I know that that would be listed in the city's feature class, and so once I identify that, I can hit the Find button, and it will prompt where that is. Just as an aside, if ever a box is in your way, you just grab the blue bar, click, and move it out of the way. So if I select the word down in the bottom part of this box here, it will highlight it for me. You can see those lines showing where the requested item is. If I right-click on it in the bottom, I'm provided with some options. I can zoom to it. Flash is just what we just saw. I can create a bookmark, which means that the computer will be able to go directly to it. I can select it, which we'll talk about in a second, and some other options. So Find is a very useful tool. Another tool that we will have come in handy is the Measure tool. So if you need to determine how far things are from one another. The Measure tool is fairly simple. You just change the function of your cursor to it by selecting it. The one slight thing that you do need to be aware of is what distance units you want to measure in. So the little pull down that's here right next to the mathematical summation symbol, if you select distance, and then here it's defaulted to miles, but maybe you would want it in meters or kilometers depending upon what it is that you're measuring. So just to be sure that you're measuring in the correct units. You can see that my cursor now looks slightly different. So I could make a measurement of from Portland to, say, a different city in my map. Now remember, this is as the crow flies, not any other format. And then I have a segment difference, a segment measurement here, as well as a complete length. You can also click more than one time, for example, and you can get the individual segment list, but you would also get an accumulation, right? The total summation of your travels, if you will. The next thing that we'll look at is the Select tool. This is the tool that's identified with a slight turquoise, a white arrow, and a slight turquoise box. One of the most useful things of GIS is being able to separate out information that you choose, that you specifically want, and then be able to manipulate just that information. And we would do that through a selection process. We'll learn a couple of different ways, but just to start with the most basic way right now. One way that we can do this is just by a very simple click and drag. So if I change the function of my cursor to the Select tool and then click and drag a box around an area, I get everything within that area is selected. You'll note that it's turned a blue color. This can be changed if you don't want it. Now it's possible that maybe you only wanted the cities. Here, if you can tell, not only have the cities been selected and turned blue, but the state lines have as well. This is where we will utilize a different variation of our table of contents. You can see the matching turquoise box here from here. If we change the presentation of our table to showing what can or cannot be selected, we would get some different opportunities here. Now, since I've already made a selection, the table of contents has changed in a couple of ways. For example, my lakes, it identifies that it has selected 5 lakes, and it tells me what they are. My states, the same way. It has selected 5 states. Cities, it has selected 16 of them. But let's say I was only interested in showing cities. I did not want the other information to be selected. The first thing we always have to do is get rid of our past selection. If we goof up, we have to clear the selected features. That's the same shape box here, just all in white. When I select that, everything goes back to normal. Now I am able to alter what is selected, and I do that by clicking the box in the list here, and it will remove itself from an option. So I'll go ahead and click these, all of the ones that I do not want. So I now have a category called not selectable, and those are listed here. And so now the only ones that it will pick are the ones that remain in the selectable category. So again, if I change the function of my cursor back to the select tool and draw a similar box as I did before, now the only thing that is selected are my cities, which is what I wanted in the first place. Again, if we want to clear our selected features, then we would do that. This concludes the lecture for the video demonstration for the first lecture.